Delay, yes. Good evening. Good
Very
evening.
Venerable. Oh, thank you for pinning Venerable.
Mhm.
So he's seen by everyone. Thank you. And thank you so much for coming in, everyone. It's raining. It's starting to rain. Bangalore is, you know, there are clouds overcast. And despite all of that, I am very happy to see all of you joining in. It's a very important session. This is something that Kyabje Lama Zopa Rinpoche advised all of us to study about death and impermanence. And and we're very happy that we have Venerable Lekden with us to lead this session today. This is the fourth session. And it was planned, or the online session was planned the last minute because of the orange alert issue. So one start of announcement, the next week's session, which was online, will actually be offline and in person. So please be at the center. It's beautiful. And thank you so much, Venerable Legden, for joining us and leading today's session. Just for everyone, if you could kindly keep your videos on, it'll really help. I'm a school teacher, and I know when I've taken online classes, it's 2 times more work when we have seen black boxes because we don't know if students are really there or,
Hmm.
it's very hard on the teacher. So I request you to switch off your audio, but please keep your videos on so it is very interactive if you can. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Didila. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. I'm sorry I can't be there in person, but probably safer this way. It's rainy and miserable here at Sarah as well. Our power has been going on and off all day, as you can expect. So we have power right now, but it keeps kind of flickering in and out. My internet has been going on and off all day. So we'll just do this together. If I disappear for a while, I'm going to find a way back. Don't worry. I have more than one internet option. We'll see how it goes. So bear with me. I'll bear with you, and we'll work together. So this is our last session on death and impermanence. And we've covered most of the material. There's a little bit more to cover. But I did want to share some prayers. So when we start our prayers today, we're going to offer Heart Spoon again, like we did in my last teaching. And then if we have time today, I want to go through a prayer by Panchen Lobsang Chökyi Gyalten. And so I'm going to share both of those prayers in the chat now. I'll bring them up on my screen when it's time for us to recite them. So you won't need them for today's session, but that way you can have copies of them on your own. So those are both shared in the chat. Now, let's start by creating a sacred space for ourselves, whatever that means for us. It's been a long Saturday. Whatever we've been doing throughout the day, whatever worldly activities, whether it be for work or family or pleasure, whatever we've been up to, let's put all those aside for a moment. Let's create a sacred space for ourselves here, whether we are on our phone or on our laptop or whatever it may be. Recognize that we are coming together to study the Dharma, to practice the Dharma, to learn about how to find liberation from all samsara for ourselves and for all sentient beings. This is the most important thing we can do with our lives, is to study and practice the Dharma. And so let's create a space for that. And in that space, let's set a strong motivation, a strong intention that our time together today, studying the Dharma, the teachings of the Buddha, learning how to put them into practice, that we don't do this just for our own knowledge. We don't do this for our own benefit alone, so that our life might be easier, but we do it so that we might be of more benefit to others. We recognize that if we were to become Buddhas, we'd be of maximum benefit to others. And so we are working toward our own Buddhahood, toward our own perfect and unending bliss, freedom from samsara, not for our own benefit, but so that we might have all of the wisdom and the skillful means that are necessary to be of maximum benefit to others. And so it's for this reason that we come together today. It's for this reason that we are going to be studying these texts and trying to learn how to put these into practice. So let's set that strong motivation, and we will offer some prayers together to help solidify that motivation. So we will start with refuge and bodhicitta, which we'll do 3 times in Tibetan and then once in English, and then we'll continue on from there. Sangye chiran soki chonam la janchu paru dagni kyapsu chi dagi jinsogi pesonam gi drola pencher sangye drupar shok sangye chiran soki chonam la janchu paru dagni kyapsu chi dagi jinsogi pesonam gi drola pencher sangye drupar shok Sange Chiran Soki Chonam La Janchu Bardu Dagni Kyabsuchi Dagi Jinsogi Pesonam Gi Drola Pincher Sange Drupar Shok. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and the other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. Reverently I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind. I present clouds of every type of offering, actual and imagined. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginningless time, and rejoice in the merit of all holy and ordinary beings.
These are the goodie bags
Please
that
remain
we
until
gave.
the end of cyclic existence,
Doing an
and
unboxing.
turn the
These
wheel
are
of
the goodie
Dharma for
bags
living
that we
beings.
gave to our the goodie bags
I
that
dedicate my own
it's a
merits and those of all
little tiny.
others to the great enlightenment. So now we'll offer a short mandala offering. This is a way to both request the teaching that we're about to receive for those of us that are receiving a teaching, and also request all of the blessings of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas that they might watch upon our enterprise and rejoice and offer their blessings. We'll do this once in Tibetan and then once in English. Sa shi pu gi Joik Xing Me To Tram Ri Rab Ling Shi Ni Den Gem Pan Di Sange Shindu Mikte Oi Joku Namanda Shinla Je This ground, anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha field and offer it. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. Idam Guru Rana Mandala Kam Niryatayami. Next, we'll offer praise to Shakyamuni Buddha. This prayer we recite all the time at the monastery. It's a really powerful prayer because it's listing the many great qualities and attributes of Shakyamuni Buddha, and not only offering prostrations to Shakyamuni Buddha, but also to the Dharma and to the Sangha, so all 3 jewels. And then it is encapsulating all of the teachings of the Buddha in the final verses. And so it is developing a mind of pure refuge as well as recognizing the whole breadth of the Buddhist teachings. So by reciting this with an open mind, right, with a heart of interest in the Dharma, what we're doing is we are opening ourselves up to all the teachings of the Buddha, right? We are making our mind supple and available to receive all the teachings. To the founder, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings. To you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings. To you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. When, O supreme amongst humans, you were born on this earth, you paced out 7 strides and then said, I am supreme in this world. To you, who are wise then, I prostrate. With pure bodies, form supremely pure, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best, Lord, to you I prostrate. With the supreme signs, face like spotless moon, color like gold, to you I prostrate. Dust free like you, the 3 worlds are not. Incomparably wise one, to you I prostrate. The Savior having great compassion, the Founder having all understanding, the field of merit with qualities like a vast ocean, to you, the one gone to thusness, I prostrate. The purity that frees one from attachment, the virtue that frees one from the lower realms, the one path, the sublime pure reality, to the Dharma that pacifies, I prostrate. Those who are liberated and who also show the path to liberation, the holy field qualified with realizations, who are devoted to the moral precepts, to you, the sublime community intending virtue, I prostrate. Homage to the Supreme Buddha, homage to the Dharma refuge, homage to the great Sangha, to all 3 ever devout homage, to all worthy of respect, bowing with bodies as many as all realms atoms in all aspects, with supreme faith I pay homage. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions, subdue your mind thoroughly, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a visual aberration, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew or a bubble, a dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through these merits may all sentient beings attain the rank of all-seeing, subdue the foe of faults, and be delivered from samsara's ocean, perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. Great. And since this is our final class on death and impermanence, I thought we would offer Heart Spoon, which is a prayer composed by Pabonka Rinpoche. And it is encouragement through recollecting impermanence. So we'll talk about later in class today, but if we look at the steps in the Lamrim, in the stages of the path material for studying death and impermanence, after you recognize the advantages to recollecting death and impermanence and the disadvantages to not recollecting it, and then after you learn how to actually recollect and meditate on death and impermanence using the 9 steps, the 9-point meditation, as well as the 3 determinations, then the next step is to actually prepare the mind for death and to actually meditate on the aspects of death. And so there's 2 ways to do this, or at least 2 ways to do this. And this text contains a lot of the instructions for one of those ways. So this text is really powerful to use as a meditation guide, right? A lot of the prayers we recite, it's not just something we can learn from. We use these prayers as objects of meditation. So if we need to meditate on impermanence and death, we can use a prayer like this, and we can recite one verse, and then we can sit for a few minutes just contemplating that verse, doing a visualization based on that verse, and then move on to the next verse. Right? So these aren't just things we recite. They aren't just things that we learn. We use these prayers as types of meditations as well. There are things we recite. There are ways for us to remember all these aspects, but they're also meditation tools. So I like the opportunity to share them with you in that way. Ah, the hurt. Kind Lama, look to this pitiful one. How I behave and how I have cheated myself my entire life. Please look upon this mindless one with compassion. The essential advice to give yourself the heart spoon. Keep it deep within your heart. Don't be distracted. Don't be distracted. Reflect upon the state of your life from the essential drop at your heart. Since beginningless cyclic existence, which hasn't ended up to now, though you've experienced beginningless cycles of rebirths, just so many variations on happiness and pain, you haven't achieved even the slightest benefit from them. And though at present you've attained freedom and fortune so difficult to find, always till now they've finished and been lost, empty and without meaning. Now, if you care about yourself, the time has come to practice the essence of future happiness, virtuous actions. You appear so capable, smart, and clever, but you are a fool. While you cling to the child's play of the appearances of this life, suddenly you're overwhelmed by the fearful Lord of Death, and without hope or means to endure, there's nothing you can do. This is going to happen to you. Because you think I'm not going to die for some time, I'm not going to die for some time, while distracted by the never ending activities of this life, suddenly the fearful Lord of Death arrives and says, now it is time to die. This is going to happen to you. Though you make arrangements saying tomorrow and tomorrow, just then suddenly you have to go. This is going to happen to you. And without choice, leaving behind in disarray your left off work, left food and drink, you'll have to depart. This is going to happen to you. There's no time other than today to spread your bedding and go off to sleep. And upon your last bed you fall like an old tree, and others, unable to turn you over with their lily soft hands, tug at your clothes and blankets. This is going to happen to you. Even if you completely wrap your body in last under and outer clothes, still you have no freedom to wear them other than just today. And when that body becomes rigid as earth and stone, you behold for the first time your own corpse. This is going to happen to you. Though you struggle to speak your last words, your will and expressions of sorrow, pitifully your tongue dries up, and you can't make yourself clear. This is going to happen to you. Even though others put your final food, holy substances, and relics with a trickle of water into your mouth, you're unable to swallow even a single drop, and it overflows from the corpse's mouth. This is going to happen to you. Though surrounded by a circle of close relatives, heart friends, and those near to your heart, and even though they're loving and distressed at the end of your being together, while crying and clinging, just then you have to separate forever. This is going to happen to you. Though you experience the horrific hallucinations like a turbulence of waves, and are overcome by unbearable, excruciating pain, pitiful though you may be, there's nothing more to be done. The appearances of this life are setting like the sun. This is going to happen to you. Though with unbearable compassion your Lama and Vajra friends plead in your ears for a critical, virtuous thought to arise, and even though they do so with loving minds, there's no hope, it's unthinkable. This is going to happen to you. With an expelled, rasping sound of sore at the time of death, the movement of your breath builds faster and faster, then breaks like the string of a violin. At the end of your life has come, at the end of your life has come to its close. This is going to happen to you. There'll come a time when your cherished and sadly lost lovely body is called corpse, disgusting and rotten, and a time when your body, which can't bear even rough bedding and mattress, is laid out on the bare ground. This is going to happen to you. There'll come a time when your body, which can't bear even a thorn, is chopped to pieces, and from the bone its flesh is torn, and a time when your body, which can't stand even fleas and lice, is devoured by birds and dogs till there's nothing left. This is going to happen to you. Though you go to so much trouble blowing prr prr and wrapping your body in the finest clothes, there'll come a time when that body is placed within a burning house, and your body, which can't bear even the fire of a glowing stick of incense, has to be burned in the midst of a fiery conflagration. This is going to happen to you. There'll come a time when entering into roaring flames all your flesh and bone are burned and reduced to a pile of ash, or a time when your body, which can't bear even heavy cloth, is wedged tight into a hole in the earth. This is going to happen to you. There'll come a time of announcing the deceased so-and-so, him or herself, at the beginning and end of your sweet name. This is going to happen to you. And a time when the area is filled with sobbing sounds of your affectionate close companions and circle of servants. This is going to happen to you. There'll come a time of dividing up your clothes, hats, possessions, and livestock, with nothing left in the four directions and corners. And there'll come a time in total despair alone when you reach the passage to the intermediate state. This is going to happen to you. The terrors of the four fearful enemies descending upon you are going to come. The appearance of being trapped beneath a mountain of packed rock and rubble and buried under a furious avalanche of earth, what to do. The appearance of being set adrift on the surface of a vast sea and carried about by violent swirling waves, what to do. The experience of your heart and ears being split open by the sizzling and crackling sounds of a fiery conflagration, what to do. The fearful experience of being enveloped and swept away by the swirling dark winds of the end of an eon, what to do. When you're driven by the powerful red winds of karma and swallowed up by a terrifying darkness, what to do. When you're bound with a lasso by the messengers of Yama and in total despair are led away, what to do. When you're tortured in so many detestable ways by ox and scorpion-headed karmic agents, what to do. When you're before the Yama King, the Lord of Death, as he weighs up the whites and blacks, your virtuous and non-virtuous actions, what to do. When Yama exposes your lie of having spent your human life in attachment, hatred, and deceit, what to do. When at Yama's court, the punishment that is the ripening effect of your negative actions is meted out, what to do. When your naked body is stretched out on the glowing red-hot iron ground in the fires of hell, what to do. Though your body is cut to pieces by a rain of weapons, you have to experience it without dying, what to do. Though you're cooked in molten iron until your flesh falls away and your bones disintegrate, still you have to experience it without dying, what to do. Though your body and fire burn inseparably, still you have to experience it without dying, what to do. When your body is pierced by a freezing cold wind and cracks to 100,000 pieces, what to do? Having fallen into the miserable state of hungry ghosts with its hunger and thirst, you have to starve for many years, what to do? When you've become one of those stupid, dumb, unfortunate animals that eat each other alive, what to do? When the unbearable suffering of the evil gone realms has actually befallen you, what to do? Now, don't be distracted with the sounds of hurrying la-or, la-or. Right this moment is the time to steal your will. It's not only time, it's almost too late. Right now, right now. Laor, Laor, apply yourself with great force. Holy precept of the Lama, kind father, heart of the authoritative scriptures of the victorious Lobsang, practice of the pure path of the complete Sutra and Tantra. It's time to place real experience upon your mind stream. Who's faster, Yama, the Lord of Death, or you, in your practice of realizing the essence of your eternal dream, the welfare of both yourself and others, as much as you can each day, unifying the three doors of your body, speech, and mind? Put the whole of your effort into your practice. Great. So you can see that's a powerful prayer because it doesn't only go after and describe the aspects of death itself, but then goes on to the next part of the Lamrim where it talks about the suffering of the lower realms. And one of the reasons we meditate on death and impermanence is we want to develop a healthy fear of death, right? So right now, most of us have a fear of death, but that fear of death is a worldly fear of death. That's a fear of death that is based in our self-cherishing minds, and it is based on us being attached to the possessions we have or to the people around us and so forth. It's not a healthy fear of death. It's a fear of death that causes us only to engage in more non-virtue, to lead us into suffering again and again. If we can develop a healthy fear of death and a healthy fear of the lower realms, which we may be born into after we die from this life, then that encourages us to practice Dharma now. So the reason we meditate on death and impermanence right at the beginning of our practice is because it serves as fuel, right? It motivates our practice. I should say, I forgot to say that if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. I'm not going to see them if you put them in the chat, so you can just interrupt me if it's an appropriate time to interrupt. We'll have some time at the end for questions at the end, but if something needs clarification right away, it's okay if you interrupt. Just please make sure your video is on when you do, and then go ahead and turn on your mic, and you can interrupt me, and that's fine. And if it's something I'm going to answer later, then we'll put off the question. But don't worry about that. So since this is our last session, just to review quickly how we got here, when we study the Lamrim is organizing all of the teachings of the Buddha into a series that we follow that isn't just a series that starts with what's simple and moves on to what's complicated, right? That's not the point of the Lamrim. It's not organized by what is easy to understand or difficult to understand. It's organized in such a way that the practices build upon each other, that the practices create momentum, and they push our practice forward, right? So that's the important part to remember. When we study the Lamrim and these topics of the Lamrim, it's not simply because this is easy for beginners and this is advanced for experts. That's not the reason it's structured this way. So in the Lamrim, we talk about meditations or topics that are common to the beings of the small scope and medium scope, and then the topics of the beings of a great scope. So anything that has to do with engaging in bodhisattva practice, those we relegate to the practices that are uncommon to high capacity beings or beings of the great scope. The other practices, we talk about them being shared in common with smaller scope and medium scope beings. What I think is important when we look at the Lamrim topics, though, these aren't just things that we study, right? These aren't ideas that we study. These are things that we meditate on. That's the important part. These are the meditations we have that are in common with the small scope beings or beings with a small intention and then beings with a medium intention, right? These are actual meditations we need to do. These aren't simply facts that we have to learn about the nature of reality. These are practices that we have to adopt. These are ideas that we have to make one with our mind through our practice of meditation again and again and again. Okay, so the first step, obviously, is learning them, things we don't know. And we learn them by engaging in classes like this and by reading, and then by studying new material, right? So we have this process of what's called hearing or study, and then contemplation, and then meditation. So whenever we're learning new material, that's the first step, right? In the Tibetan and Sanskrit, it's called hearing because traditionally you would learn new things by listening to them from your teacher explain them. So first we have to absorb new material by going to teachings or reading in books and so forth. And then when we learn these new facts, these new ideas, right, then we contemplate them, which is to say we try to analyze if we think they're actually correct. We look at all of the reasoning behind them, and then we look at how those ideas fit into our life and fit into our experience of the world, right? So when we first we have to learn something new, and then we have to develop a mind that recognizes the validity of that and understands all of the different aspects of it. And then once we've done that, then we meditate on that topic, whatever it may be. So those are the three steps, right? Hearing, contemplation, and meditation. The point of meditation is to make that topic, whatever it is, inseparable from your mind. That's what it means to meditate on something. So when we're meditating on death and impermanence, we first are realizing what we mean by death and impermanence. We're realizing why it comes at this point in this series of teachings called the Lamrim, why it comes in the beginning, why it's useful to have at the beginning of our practice. And then once we understand that, we actually engage in the meditations in such a way that our mind is always aware of impermanence and death. That knowledge and experience of our own mortality and our own limited time on this earth motivates and compels all of our actions, right? That's what it means to meditate on it and to make it one with our mind. So these topics, the Lamrim topics, aren't just things that we study. They are, first, we study them, but then we have to put them into practice. If we only understand them from an intellectual point of view, that's not going to help our everyday life. And the point of the Dharma is to make our lives better, is to improve every aspect of our life. Okay? I know that our motivations, our Mahayana motivation is to become Buddhist to benefit all sentient beings. That's true, 100% true. But in the short term, this practice of Dharma benefits us in this life right now. I guarantee it does. So if the teachings are only kept in some intellectual space in your mind that are important when you attend a class or when you're reading a book, that's not very helpful. But when you actually meditate on these topics and they infiltrate your whole life, right? And then they start changing how you behave, how you see the world around you, how you react to the world around you, how you experience the world around you. And then they become part of your way of being in the world. That is what it means to meditate on something and become familiar with it. So it's important just to remember these aren't just topics that we study for intellectual reasons. And so in the Lamrim, our way of studying the Lamrim, we start with focusing on how to properly rely upon a spiritual friend. And then we study the perfect human rebirth to remind us how fortunate we are to have this opportunity to practice and study Dharma with all of the privileges that we have. And then after that, the next one is we meditate on death and impermanence, which once we've come to accept how rare it is and how fortunate we are to have the opportunity to study Dharma, then we need to find the motivation to compel us to study all the time. And so that is where we are with death and impermanence. And that's why it's right at the beginning of the practice. Now, and I should say, as I mentioned, we all have a fear of death, right? Most of us do. But that fear isn't a healthy fear because it doesn't lead us towards engaging in spiritual practice. It doesn't lead us towards virtue. It leads us towards more hoarding of wealth. It leads us towards more attachment. So what we have to do by meditating on death, we're not encouraging that unhealthy fear, right? We want a healthy fear of death. And a healthy fear of death isn't afraid of dying itself. What it's afraid of is that I will not have made the most use of my life before I die. Now that I know how valuable my life is as a human being with all of the privileges that I have, whatever they may be, if I were to not use that in the most efficient way possible, that is what I'm afraid of. Actual dying does not matter, right? Actual dying is just the separation of my mind from this body. And then my mind will find a new body. And if I've engaged in the right virtue, if I've done the work, if I've engaged in a life of spiritual practice, then I hopefully will have a body that is another perfect human rebirth that will again meet the Dharma, that will let me move closer and closer to Buddhahood. Because I don't expect that I'll become a Buddha in this very life. It's possible, if we practice Tantra, to become a Buddha in one life, but most of us, we just want to move in the right direction, right? And so that, the fear of death, the healthy fear of death that we have, isn't the actual act of dying. We're afraid that we'll have wasted our life. That's what we need to be afraid of. And that fear is what motivates us to engage in spiritual practice. That fear is what motivates Dharma practice. And so the way we develop that fear, and we'll talk more about the fear at that time of death, because, as I mentioned, and a lot of the great lamas say, by fearing death now, then when it is time for me to die, I'll have no fear left, right? By acting now out of a fear of death, then when I actually die, there'll be no fear because I will have known that I spent my life engaged in Dharma practice. So there's nothing left to fear if I know that I've lived a virtuous life. I've lived a life that is caring for others and is doing my best to follow the path and the teachings that are taught by the Buddha and the Buddhist followers, right? So there is no fear at the moment of death if that fear motivates me now. So it's healthy to have now. If I don't do that work now, then when I'm on my deathbed, right, then I'm terrified of what's going to happen next. And if I haven't done the work to overcome my worldly attachments, then I'm going to look at all of these things I'm leaving behind, and I'm going to be terrified to go away, to have those go away. I'm going to be terrified to be separated from the ones I care about. I'm going to be terrified of what's going to come next because I haven't lived my life according to a spiritual path. That is the fear we want to avoid, right? And we can only avoid that by doing the work now, making the most of every moment we have. So in this meditation or the study or exploration of death and impermanence, we look at the advantages of contemplating death and the disadvantages of not contemplating death. And then we develop mind of the 3 determinations. And those 3 determinations are based on the 9-point meditation. And I know that Venerable Keltenla went over this with you last week. So I'm going to go over it quickly just as a review. We won't spend a lot of time on it. We'll go on to the next step. But I'll just refresh our awareness of it. And then if there are any questions about it, we can bring that up now. And then we'll continue. Okay. So this 9-point meditation is really focusing on us developing 3 different determinations, strong minds and strong intentionalities. And so there are 3 roots that go with those 3 determinations, and each root has 3 reasons supporting it. Okay. So the first root is that death is certain. That is the first thing we meditate on, the fact that death is certain. And this is the hardest one of all of them, of the three. So, in brief, the three are death is certain, the time of death is uncertain, and nothing will benefit you at the time of your death other than your practice of the Dharma or your spiritual practice. Those are the three roots. Of those three, death is certain is, excuse me, is difficult. The most difficult is that the time of death is uncertain. We know we're going to die, but we don't believe it's going to happen today. We don't believe it's going to happen tomorrow, right? And because of that, we don't live our lives as if that's possible. But it's 100% possible that all of us together today, of all of us, one of us doesn't wake up tomorrow. That's 100% possible. There's no guarantee, right? So of the three, the time of death being uncertain is the most difficult to actually realize. But the first one, that death is certain, is also really hard for us to understand beyond just an intellectual understanding. So that's why it's important to do this meditation, because we have to go beyond intellectual understanding into experiential understanding. So first we have death is certain, right? And that has three reasons. The first reason is that there isn't anyone that hasn't died. And we can look at even the Buddhas and the great practitioners. They show the aspect of getting old, getting sick, and dying. Even the best practitioners we know show that aspect. They show the aspect of leaving their worldly bodies. We could think of when we're studying Lamrim material, many of us look at Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, which is a text by Pabon Rinpoche. There was actually a teaching he gave, and he gave that teaching, and it was recorded down, written down. He gave that teaching in 1921. So when he gave that teaching, there were hundreds of monks in attendance, right? None of them are alive today. Not a single one is alive today. So we read that text. That's an incredible experiential explanation of the Lamrim, of Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment. And it's relatively recent. We consider Pabonka a contemporary teacher as opposed to a classical teacher. Tsongkhapa was in the 14th and 15th century. That's what we call classical teacher. Pabonka was in this Liberation of Palm Your Hand was given in 1921. Yet none of those monks that heard that teaching with their ears are alive today. None of them, not a single one. Okay, so death is certain because there's no one that hasn't died, and then there's nothing added to our lifespan. Our lifespans are constantly decreasing. That's the second point. And the third point is that we are definitely going to die before we get around to actually engaging in Dharma practice, right? So what that means is the amount of time for practice is small. That's what that means. Okay. We might think that I have my whole life ahead of me. But if we look at our life and we think that a third of our day is spent sleeping, if not more than that, and then how much time do we spend eating and doing other bodily functions and doing these things? If you look at any given day, how much time do you actually have? And how much time is lost to worldly activity, right? How much time is interrupted or interrupts your practice? How many of your worldly activities in your everyday life? So we don't have a lot of time for practice, even if we know how many years left we have. A lot of the teachers say that if we look at our lives at the time of death, we see that there are three phases. The first phase of our life is the phase that we spend unaware that we're going to die. And then the second phase of our life is the phase when we're aware of it, but we procrastinate and put off our Dharma practice. And then the last phase is the phase when we realize we've put it off too long and we lament. So there's the phase of being unaware, the phase of procrastinating, and the phase of lamenting. And so we don't want to live those three phases. We want to make most of our life right now, right? So of those three reasons, when we become confident that death is certain, the determination that comes from that, the natural result of that is, I must practice Dharma, right? That is the determination that comes from that first point. Death is certain, therefore I must practice Dharma. Now, the second point, or the second root, is that the time of death is uncertain. So human lifespan is not fixed. That's the first reason, right? There's no guarantee how long any human will be alive. Some humans live to be over 100, and some don't even live to get out of the womb, right? So there's no fixed lifespan for human beings. That's the first rationale. The second is that there are more factors that contribute to our death than there are that contribute to our life. Okay, so there are external causes that can cause us to die. There are internal causes like sickness or illness. And then even those things that actually help us live, such as food or water or medicine, can actually kill us if we don't use them in appropriate ways. So there are more things in the world that contribute to our death than there are that contribute to our life. So because of this, the time of death is uncertain. And the third one is the recognition that the human body is very fragile, right? Think of the strongest, most resilient person you know, and they are still just a bag of meat, essentially. Like our bodies are so easily broken apart. Okay? So those three, that the human lifespan isn't fixed, that there are more factors contributing to our death than to our life, and that the human body is fragile, are the three reasons that support the recognition that the time of death is uncertain. And so from that, we develop the second determination. So the first determination is that I have to practice Dharma. The second determination is not only do I have to practice Dharma, but I have to practice Dharma from this very moment, right? So it takes that determination to practice Dharma and it increases the urgency. It says I have to do it right now because there's no guarantee that I'll have tomorrow. There's no guarantee that I'll wake up tomorrow morning. So I can't put off my practice of Dharma. And then the third root is that there's nothing that will help you at the time of your death other than the Dharma or your spiritual practice. So the rationale behind this is we say that your wealth and your possessions are of no benefit to you at the time of your death, and your friends and your relatives are of no benefit to you at the time of your death, and even your own body is of no benefit to you at the time of your death. Okay? And so because of those three things, we use those three as our reasons to recognize that nothing will benefit us except for our spiritual practice, our engaging the holy Dharma. That is what is going to benefit us at the time of death. That is what is going to propel us to a fortunate rebirth, and to allow us to continue practicing Dharma and moving closer and closer to Buddhahood, right, to the state of permanent bliss. Only spiritual practice will help us. And so from that, we develop the determination. Not only do I have to practice Dharma, not only do I have to practice Dharma now, from now on, but I have to practice only Dharma. That I have to commit every aspect of my life to Dharma practice. Okay. That doesn't mean everyone should go become a monk or a nun or move to a cave somewhere and meditate the rest of their lives. But it means that we have to make sure all of the aspects of our life are infused with Dharma practice, with Dharma wisdom, and with Dharma action. That's what that means. Okay. So it's not to say that we should all just, live the life of an ascetic, and that you can't enjoy your friends or your family. You can't enjoy having, you can't enjoy having a good time in any way. That's not what it means, because that is not contradictory to practicing Dharma. Okay? What's contradictory to practicing Dharma is doing that with a mind of attachment. What's contradictory to practicing Dharma is making that your source of happiness and believing that those external things will actually cause long-lasting happiness, as opposed to just worldly happiness, which is temporary, which is fleeting, which is in and of itself a type of suffering. Okay? So it's misunderstanding the nature of reality. That is the problem, not engaging with things that you find pleasurable. So that's the 9-point meditation. And I know that Venerable Gyalten went into more detail, so I won't go into any more detail now. But the important part of that 9-step meditation is that in our practice, we can go through all 9, right? It's a really wonderful meditation to do. And it's even sometimes more powerful to do it multiple times and to really focus on one of those 3, right? So the first time you do it, you focus on the fact that death is definite or certain. And you do all 9 of the visualizations and contemplations, but you spend more time on those first 3. And then you do the meditation again the next day maybe, and you spend more time on the second 3, on the second grouping of 3. And then you do the meditation again a day later, and you spend more time on that last grouping of 3. So it doesn't always have to be the same amount of time for every practice, right? You want to make your practice robust and complete, and so you change it up a little bit, right? And that makes it more immediate for you and keeps it more interesting. So that is learning how to properly contemplate death. So next, we want to talk about after you develop the three determinations, you actually meditate on the aspects of death. Okay? And there are a couple different ways that we go about doing this. But by meditating on the aspects of death, what we're doing is preparing for death. So that's something to think about. What does it mean to prepare for death, right? On one hand, we have the worldly way we can prepare for death, and those are helpful, right? So taking care of your worldly possessions, making arrangements, things like that, those are all important to do. And one of the things that's recommended to us is that the less possessions we have, the less chance of attachment coming at our moment of death, right? So one of the reasons we try not to own a lot of things is because there are less shackles to bind us at the time of death. So taking care of your worldly possessions, making preparations for your death, those are important things to do, even if you're young. And so depending on um, where you are in your life and who you have as partners or as community members, that may look different. But it's never too early to start thinking about those things and making those preparations, just in a very worldly sense, you know? I know from my side, I don't know how many of you have experienced the death of a loved one, but it's overwhelming. It's an overwhelming thing to do, to go through. And if you can make that easier for your friends and family when you die, it's incredibly powerful gift you can give them. And so when my best friend died in 2019, he did have life insurance, but he also had already spoken to the funeral home that was going to take care of all of his arrangements. And he had a special account that was just dedicated to his funeral expenses that was paid out only to me and my mother because we were the ones in charge of his estate. So he had done all of this work ahead of time. He had chosen and paid for a burial plot. He had prepaid for all of these things. So he did all the work ahead of time. So all we had to do was kind of show up and sign things. And sometimes when you're grieving, you don't have a lot of mental space to do more than that, right? So that's a gift we can give the people we care about is take care of our worldly possessions, make arrangements for our death. And that way, if we have certain things that matter to us, so for Buddhists, there are certain rituals around the time of death that are often considered important, we can make plans for those now. So our friends and our families know that these are things we want, so that if we were to die suddenly, they wouldn't be left wondering, what should I do, right? So those worldly preparations are helpful because they calm our mind. They make our mind more settled. They help get rid of these extraneous external things that maybe in the big picture of trying to become Buddhas don't matter, but in our lives, they can become overwhelming and important. So I'm a big advocate for taking care of those worldly things, right? And that helps you prepare in a worldly sense for death. What's most important, of course, though, is preparing our minds for death. That's what's most important. So we can prepare our possessions and we can take care of these worldly preparations. And those are useful for us and for our loved ones. But what's most important is preparing our minds for death. And so that's what we're doing by engaging in this study right now, engaging in this practice, engaging in these meditations. And so when we meditate on the aspects of death, what we're doing is preparing our minds for death. And for some people, it's difficult to meditate on their own death right away. So we're often advised to meditate on the dead bodies of others, right? Because when you're meditating on the aspects of death, as you saw in the prayer we recited, it talks about all the things that will happen to your corpse after you die. And it talks about them and they seem shocking. They seem like a horror movie, right? All these awful, terrible things are going to happen. You're going to be devoured by dogs and birds, and you're going to be, consumed by bugs and all these things buried under the ground. They seem like it's meant to gross you out. But the point is, those are going to happen to this body when we die. And yet we have so much attachment for this body. We do so much work to make this body beautiful. And we look at this body and have the idea that this body is me. I must take care of it. I must preserve it. I must make it beautiful. We spend so much time and money and energy, focused on our body. And then our body fails us. And it literally becomes food for all these other animals. And so meditating on that, the reality of our body and how impermanent it is, really drives home that we are going to die, that we are nothing but, a bag of meat, essentially. And so there are different ways to do this, the Bodhicharya Vatara by Shantideva, right? living the life of Bodhisattva, or the way of Bodhisattva, he says, "Go into the charnel grounds. Other people's skeletons and my own body are both subject to decay. When will I see that they are the same?" Right now, we look at our bodies and we look at corpses of other people or their skeletons, and we don't realize that there's no difference between those. The difference is that my mind is currently connected to this body, but that's a temporary condition and one that I do not have control over. So we meditate on others' bodies first, if that's helpful, meditating on dead bodies and on the fact that other beings die. And then we meditate on our own body, that our own body is going to, when our mind separates from our body, going to decompose. It's going to break apart. And that isn't something we have to be afraid of, right? That isn't something we need to fear. That's something that we have to recognize. So the three core sufferings of samsara and the three sufferings that the Buddha recognized when he was still a prince and he was taking the chariot tour of the kingdom is that I'm going to get old, I'm going to get sick, and I'm going to die. These three sufferings are ones that none of us can escape, okay? And so they aren't things to fear in a worldly sense, because fearing them is like fearing something that is inevitable. So instead, we come to embrace them and recognize them. And now none of this is saying don't take care of your body. It's not saying don't eat healthy and exercise and do all these things because we want our body to last as long as we can, right? Of course. Without this body, our mind wouldn't have the opportunity to practice Dharma. So we recognize that the mind and body are connected, right? Like a rider on a horse. So yes, we want to take care of our body. I'm not saying totally ignore the well-being of your body. But what I'm saying is that shouldn't be our goal. Our goal should be making our body last in a healthy enough way to practice Dharma. And recognizing that getting sick, that getting old, these things are going to happen to us. So we should not fear what's happening to our body. We should fear the loss of the ability to practice Dharma. That is what we should be afraid of. And so meditating on the coarse elements of the body brings us there. And so one type of very coarse meditation is what they call charnel ground meditation or cemetery meditation, actually meditating on going through the imagery of a decomposing body, whether it's in front of you or one that you visualize. I'm not going to do that for you guys today. Don't worry. I'm not going to talk about all the descriptions of a decomposing body, though they are really powerful meditations, right? And I guess we have a little bit of it in that prayer, and there's a little bit of it in the other prayer we're going to go over today as well. Nothing too gross or too detailed, but it is one practice that you can do, because our instinct is to be terrified of losing our body and of all these things happening to it, because we place such attachment on our body, and also because of our fundamental ignorance, we confuse this body with me, right? You say this is my body, and if something happens to this body, it happens to me, right? If I cut my hand while I'm cutting vegetables, I say I am hurt, even though really what happened is I cut my hand, okay? But no, I am hurt, because we conflate the idea of our body with the idea of me. And so therefore, to think of our body decomposing is terrifying to us. And because of that, we're afraid of death in a worldly sense. And because of that, when our death comes, when we get old, when we are sick, or when we're on our deathbed, instead of having a calm mind, we have a terrified mind. And, we talked earlier about why it's so important to have a mind of virtue at the time of death, right? So what was the main reason we talked about at least in my last class? I'm not sure what Venerable Kelden's class was, but why is it so important that we're not actually afraid at the time of death? Anyone?
Because I'll let Ratnaka go. See
Oh
how
yeah.
muted.
Okay, Ratnaka.
So if we have a virtuous thought, then our projecting karma gets affected because of that. And it's necessary that we have a good uh, rebirth so that we can continue our dharma practice.
So that is exactly. Thank you, Ratnaka. So the most important reason, especially from the perspective of sutra, is that the mind at the time of death, the state of our mind, determines which previous karma we've created will ripen and project us into our into our next rebirth. So we know that in this life and in past lives, we've engaged in both positive karma and negative karma, right? And we've planted positive seeds and negative seeds, countless negative seeds, countless positive seeds. And at the moment of death, that's when it's determined which of those seeds is going to ripen and propel us into our next rebirth. And obviously, we want it to be one of the good seeds, one of the good things we did. That's what we want to ripen, okay? And the major contributing factor to that is the state of our mind at the time of death. If we have a virtuous mind, then that is going to encourage a positive seed to ripen. So we will again be reborn with one of the upper rebirths, ideally with a perfect human rebirth that will allow us to continue practicing Dharma until we get closer and closer to Buddhahood, until we finally become Buddhas. So for that reason, that's the main reason, according to Sutra, that we don't want to have a disturbed mind at the time of death. So by meditating on the coarse impermanence of your body, then when those things happen to your body, or some version of them, right, you aren't afraid of them. They don't cause distress to your mind. The whole point of these practices is that our minds don't become overwhelmed by this sensory experience so that we can focus on Dharma. Now, what I want to talk about today is how the actual body and mind breaks down according to the Buddhist understanding of it. And these are called the cycles of dissolution. There are 8 steps of the mind and body breaking apart, basically. And so I'm going to talk through these. And the reason for studying these is there's a sutra reason and a tantra reason, okay? And so the tantra reason, it's important to have a strong mind or a good mind at the moment of death, is as our body and all of the elements, these are called the 25 coarse elements of our body. So I'll explain what all of them are, but they're gross or coarse objects or elements of our body. As those 25 sequentially dissolve, what we're left with eventually is the mind of clear light. Once we've gotten rid of all of the coarse elements, of physical elements and coarse mental elements, what's left is what we call the mind of clear light. This is the undestroyable, clearest, most subtle mind we have, the mind that then continues onto a next birth. And when you have access to that mind of clear light, this is something we try to cultivate in our tantric practice, okay? When you have access to it, then your ability to meditate is overwhelmingly powerful, okay? Because it doesn't have any of your worldly body or any of your worldly thoughts or any conceptual thought at all infiltrating it or getting in the way. So you look at some great teachers, traditionally, we say that if possible, when someone dies, you shouldn't touch their body for 3 days for the average person. Because even though their coarse body dies, and we'll talk about what the difference is between your coarse body dying and your mind actually dying and leaving the body. Even though the coarse body dies, so according to Western science, that body will be dead. We say that they may not have actually finished dying on the inside yet. Okay, there might still be active minds. And so we don't want to disturb that process. And for an average person, that can take up to 3 days. Okay. And the reason it can take so long is that last step, when they access the mind of clear light, we might actually be able to use that moment to engage in meditation, especially if we do the work now. If we don't do the work now, there's no chance, okay? To be quite frank, we have to do the work now. We have to do the work to have calm and strong minds now that can deal with that process. But even so, it can take up to 3 days. Now, great meditators and great teachers, you can see them engage in what we either call clear light meditation or it's called tukdam meditation. So from all outward appearances, their bodies will have died. There'll be no respiration. There'll be no blood circulation. There'll be no brain activity. And yet they might remain in meditation. We had a monk here, I think last year or the year before at Sarah for, I think, 18 days like this. And throughout that 18 days, their bodies don't start to decompose. There's no smell. There's none of the worldly aspects of their body breaking down because they still have subtle minds that are active within their body, even though contemporary Western science isn't able to measure that. There are a lot of scientists right now that are actually trying to measure it. And there are a number of monks who've agreed to be part of these experiments. But the problem is you have to find monks that are good meditators and who are close to dying. And then when they're about to die, alert the scientists who can then hook them up to machines to actually be there when they die and not interfere with the death process. So it's hard to actually gather data. But there are studies being done, and there are monks from Italy, I believe, as well as Russia, who have come to Sarah and done some exploration of this. But so you see monks and non-monks as well, just great teachers who, from all outward appearances, they've died, but their bodies last for another 10 days, 15 days, 20 days, a few months sometimes, because they're engaging in this subtle meditation, and that subtle mind hasn't left their body yet. Okay. So engaging in that subtle meditation, the mind of clear light, recognizing it, is something that we are trying to do when we engage in Tantra practice. So at least in one type of Tantra practice, we do what's called bringing the three bodies of a Buddha onto the path of practice. So the Dharmakaya, the Dharma body of a Buddha, which is a Buddha's wisdom, essentially, and their cessation of all afflictions, that is brought onto the path, and it parallels the time of death. And then the enjoyment body is paralleling the experience of the bardo, and the nirmana body, or the emanation body, is paralleling birth. And so in our Tantra practice, for those of you who practice Tantra, we go through the dissolution of our course, the dissolution of our course body, and then the Buddha bodies paralleling the experience of death, the bardo, the space in between death and rebirth, and rebirth. And we do that to become familiar with it, right? So if you're actually engaging in high-level Tantra practice, then you're accessing that clear light in those practices. But for most of us, what we're doing is becoming familiar with those practices. So at the time of death, we have more access to them. So we can make use of the fact that we have this moment that is free from all coarse minds. Now, for someone like me, who is a beginner and not any good at meditating and just has a very baby knowledge, I don't expect that I'll have any ability to make use of that time. But this is still an important practice, because what it does is it helps prepare me for the process of dying, right? And by preparing for this process, I can become aware of what's happening. And by being aware of what's happening, I'm not afraid, and I can use it to my advantage, right? I won't be overwhelmed. So the same idea as meditating on a corpse or as meditating on illness is that recognizing how our body breaks down step by step, and then first our coarse body and then the mind, recognizing that allows us to become familiar with it, which is healthy for our minds. And it makes the process, when we eventually get there, easier. Because the truth is, we're already somewhat in the process of dying right now. In that 9-point death meditation, in the second one, that the time of death is uncertain, the fact that you can't add to your life, right? You are, every moment of your life, you are getting closer to your death. Every single breath you take is one breath closer to your own death. Like, that's just how, the world works. And that is how life works, is that it only goes in one direction. So we are already dying right now, just in very slow motion. Milarepa said, this terrifying thing that we call a corpse, it already exists in all of the channels of this yogi's body. Okay? The distinction between corpse and living body is merely whether there's a mind that's active or not. So we already have that corpse in our body. So being aware of the process of our mind dissolving and our body dissolving is a useful thing to do. So what I thought I'd do is I'd go through the 25 gross objects, then the 8 dissolutions. And this is a lot of information, okay? So some of you might want to write it all down so you can reflect on it. Others might just want to kind of get the vibes. I can appreciate that, depending on what your level of practice is. But we'll go through it. What time is it? Okay, we have some time. I still would like to go through this prayer by Panchita Gyalten, so we'll see. So there are 25 gross or coarse elements to our body. Elements, objects, whatever you want to call them, aspects. And at the time of these 8 dissolutions, they dissolve sequentially. So I'll show you what I mean, but let's go through the 25 first. Of those 25, first you have the 5 aggregates, right? So these are the 5 skandhas, okay? So there is the form aggregate, right? That's our physical bodies. And then we have the aggregate of discrimination, of compositional factors, of feeling, and of consciousness. So those later 4 are mental aggregates, and they combine with the form aggregate to make 5. So the 5 aggregates of form, discrimination, compositional factors, feeling, and consciousness. Those are the first 5. Then we have, at least, they're sometimes sequenced in different ways. Doesn't matter, as long as you get all 25. Next, we have the 5 wisdoms. Okay. There's mirror-like wisdom. There is the wisdom of equality, it's called. The wisdom of analysis. The wisdom of achieving individual activities. And the wisdom of the nature of all phenomena. So these 5 wisdoms are higher levels of realization. And especially when you engage in Tantra, you cultivate these 5, but we cultivate them in the Sutra path as well. There are 5 high types of exalted realizations, right? That we have, even if we don't have them active in our minds right now, we have the capacity for them. So those 5 wisdoms are also considered part of these 25 course elements. Mirror-like wisdom, wisdom of equality, wisdom of analysis, wisdom of achieving individual activities, and the wisdom of the nature of all phenomena. So then we have 5 plus 5, so that's 10 so far. Next, we have the 4 elements: earth, water, fire, and wind. So in the Tibetan understanding of the body, these 4 elements are critical, that all of our body's balance is based on these 4 elements, similar to Ayurveda understanding of the body. There's also the air, the space element that doesn't come into this level of the 25 objects. If you're dealing with the medical system, then there's a 5th element of space. But for here, we have earth, water, fire, and wind. Okay. So then we have 5 plus 5 plus 4, so we're at 14. Then we have what's called the 6 sources, or the 6 source objects, or the 6 source senses, you can sometimes call. It's a very strange word in Tibetan. Kyeche. So the 6 sources is fine. And those are the 5 senses, along with the mental sense. So we have the eye sense, the ear sense, the nose sense, the tongue sense, tactile or body sense, and then our mental sensations. Okay? Those 6. And then the last of the 25 are the 5 objects that go with those 6 senses. So with the eye sense, we have colors and shapes. That's the object that is perceived by that sense. With the ear sense, there's sounds. With the nose sense, there's smells. With the taste sense, there are tastes. With the body sense, there's tactile sensations. And then the mind sense, the mental sense, doesn't have an object. I mean, it has an object, it's all phenomena. So that we don't have that in this list. So those are 25. Okay. 5 aggregates, 5 wisdoms, or 5 exalted wisdoms, 4 elements, 6 sources, and then the 5 objects. So those are called the 25 coarse or gross elements of our bodies. Yes.
These 6 senses are actually not the sense organs, but they are the sense powers. Is it correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Not the organs, the sense powers. The organs, for the 5 sense organs, those are considered part of the form element, the form aggregate, right? And so these are the sense powers themselves, or the minds. Good question. When you study the 25, in Tibetan, everything gets condensed down. So all Tibetan words, like they chop them in half to put them together. So this is just called like the Rakpa Nyernya. So Rakpa means coarse, and Nyerna means 25. And then you have Pumpo Ngatang, Yeshe Ngatang, Kam Shi Tang, Keche Druk Tang, Yul Nga. And like they just make it as short as possible, and they cut all the words in half. So the 6 sources, it's the sense powers themselves is what it's being referenced. So those are the 25. And the only reason they're important to know is because they dissolve as we die. And all of them, to be honest, at least from my level of meditation, the most important ones to know about as I meditate on the 8 types of dissolution, the ones that like I have the most control over, not control over, ability to understand, are the way the elements work and the way the sense objects work, because everything else is more subtle than my kind of distracted mind can understand. But it's important to know all of them when you're engaging in this practice, and I'll talk through it, but you'll see what parts are that stick most with you. So like I said, we have this human body, and it's going to, at the time of death, have 8 stages of dissolution, okay? And now, this isn't true for everyone, because if you die a particularly violent death, then you might go through all these 8 immediately, right? And so if you have certain illnesses or diseases, they can affect this as well, if they're overwhelming some of the senses. So these 8 dissolutions are the ideal death of someone who may have some sort of sickness, otherwise has old age, and goes through these 8 steps, okay? So, if you're in a car accident, this whole idea of not touching the body for 3 days, if you're in like a very traumatic car accident, then your mind's going to leave the body right away. Most likely. It's not going to hang out for 3 days in that experience. So this is the ideal situation. The reason they say it's important to actually meditate on these is that lamas are really high realized beings. When they know that their death is approaching, instead of waiting for their body and their mind to become too infirm, they will start actively engaging in these dissolutions because their minds are so well trained. They say, I know death is really close, and if I wait too long, then my mind or my body are going to make it impossible for me to engage in the proper meditations at the time of death. So I'm going to actively cause these things to happen now because they have such subtle control of their mind and their body, right? So it's important to become familiar with these. Now, most of us don't have that ability, so that doesn't apply to us, but it's important to understand in the context of the teachings of the Buddha how these fit in, okay? So the first dissolution of the 8 is the earth element of our body dissolves. And as the earth element of our body dissolves, that is related to our form body itself, the aggregate of form. And so we have this sensation that we are sinking. We'll have this sensation that we're being buried under a great weight, okay? The limbs of the body, they become loose. They lose all definition. It seems like the body itself is getting smaller and it becomes weak. It doesn't have the stability that it used to have because the earth element and the form element, those dissolve and they no longer are active in our bodies. So that's the first sign that we've begun this process. When you have this constant feeling of a weight and you lose kind of control or stability of your limbs and your body itself becomes thin, you always feel like you're sinking. In addition to the earth element and the form aggregate, at this time there's also the mirror-like wisdom dissolves and the eye sense deteriorates. So your ability to see things or your ability to actually actively open and close your eyes disintegrates and lessens because the eye sense itself, the ability to comprehend shapes and colors, it goes away. And because of that, all of the shape and color of your body also go away. So your luminosity, right? Any of that healthy kind of glow and any kind of definition to your body also fall away. And they say that the sign, the internal sign, so those are all the external signs. As your body feels heavy, it feels like it's being pushed down, it feels like it's sinking, it loses definition, it feels like it gets thin. Those are external signs that the earth element has dissolved. The internal signs is you have the internal vision of a mirage-like appearance. So everything you do see appears as if it were a mirage, So that's the internal sign that when you're engaging in this practice, that you would have reached this first level of dissolution. And so you can think, and I'm not going to do this for every one of the 8, but if you were to meditate on this, you just go through these things and try to actually visualize this happening to your body right now. What those physical sensations are like, that you feel heavy, you feel pushed down, you feel like you're losing the ability to see or control your eyes. Your limbs feel like they are losing their mass, they're losing their definition, they're losing their glow. So you meditate on all these things as they dissolve. So you become familiar with it. That's the point of recognizing these things. Ideally, one point is to recognize it when it's actually happening, but we're only going to have one chance at that, right, in this life. So it's not just that when we actually are going through this, we can identify it, but we want to experience it now, okay? Because by experiencing it now, we won't be afraid of it when it starts to happen. And that'll help us realize it that much more quickly. So that's the first one. So for me, the important thing to remember is the earth element dissolves and the I sense dissolves, and I suppose the form aggregate. I guess that's also important. That's what's easiest for my mind to meditate on. All of the elements are important, right? But for me to recognize that the mirror-like wisdom dissolves, that's like a harder thing for me to clue in on because my mind is so full of distractions. So maybe not for you. The mirror-like wisdom, as it dissolves, that means our mental sight becomes unclear and it becomes dark, it becomes clouded, right? Not our physical sight, but our mental sight. The second dissolution, so after the earth element dissolves, then the water element dissolves. Okay, so the water element dissolves along with, so when the water element dissolves, we have the sign that our body's waters dry up. So sweat, saliva, urine, blood, they all dry up or they move much more slowly. So obviously at this point, we'd still be technically alive, but according to Western science, but nothing is moving the way it should. So you feel parched, you feel the sense of dryness, okay? And then along with that, our aggregate of feeling dissolves. So in general, the aggregate of feeling is those minds that recognize suffering and pleasure and indifference. So we don't have control of that experience because that actual sensational mind dissolves. Now, obviously, people have pain at the time of death, physical pain and mental and emotional pain. So we know that their experience of feeling still exists. But here, by the aggregate of feeling dissolving, it means we lose conscious control of that feeling. And then the ear sense also dissolves at the same time. So our ability to hear things, both internal and external sounds, becomes weakened or goes away entirely. And so as our ear sense dissolves, then the sounds, the object of the ear sense also dissolves, which means that the internal sounds we hear go away. It's not just that we can't hear them, but they go away. And then the wisdom that dissolves is the wisdom of equality, which is to say that we're no longer mindful of the feelings that accompany our mental consciousness, because the awareness that keeps our consciousness and our feelings connected, that dissolves away. Okay, so the water element is what dissolves next, along with the ear senses. So earth dissolves into water, water then dissolves into fire. So that's the third dissolution, is that the water element of our body has dissolved into the fire element, and then the fire element dissolves. So when the fire element dissolves, we lose our internal heat. So we can't digest food, we can't digest drinks, okay? Obviously, our body gets colder. The nose sensation is what dissolves. So with the nose sense, the smell sense, not only can we not smell things, but our inhalation becomes weaker, right? And exhalation becomes stronger, actually. Odors dissolve. So obviously our body will still smell to others, but the internal odors, they dissolve. And the aggregate of discrimination dissolves. So we're not mindful or aware of being able to distinguish who's around us. You know, if there's more than one person in the room with you, your ability to say, oh, you're person A, you're person B, that goes away or gets weakened, as your ability to discriminate one from another, that dissolves, right? So earth dissolves into water, water dissolves into fire, and then fire dissolves into wind. So the fourth dissolution is wind. So our wind element dissolves. And as the wind element dissolves, then that is when this fourth dissolution happens entirely, that is when we would be what's considered dead by Western standards, right? So our heart is no longer going to be humping, and we're no longer going to be breathing at all. All of our inhalation and all of our exhalation will cease. The heart is no longer going to be moving blood through the body, and the brain won't be having any activity. So electrical activity, at least. So this would be clinical death according to Western science. And that happens at the fourth dissolution, when the wind element dissolves entirely. And then at the same time as that, the tongue and the body senses both dissolve. And along with that, tastes and tactile sensations. Oh, I haven't been giving the internal appearances, the internal signs, sorry. The second dissolution, when the water element dissolves, that has the internal sign, that's the appearance of smoke. right? So first we had, for the first one, it's the appearance of a mirage. Everything appears like a mirage. At this time, the second time, you have the appearance of smoke. So everything seems like it has taken on the appearance of smoke. The third one is the appearance of, for some reason in English, you often say fireflies, but it's more like sparks, like sparks. You see sparks. Okay, that's the third one. Then this fourth one is the appearance of like a butter lamp that is flickering in the wind. That's how they explain it. So it's light, but it's not stable. That's the internal appearance. So when you have that internal sign, that is an indication to you that you are going through the fourth dissolution. So that one is the aggregate of compositional factors, the wind element, the tongue and body senses, and then the taste and the tactile sensations, and the wisdom of achieving individual activities. So if you were counting along, over those four dissolutions, we have dissolved 22 of the 25 coarse elements of the body. There's still 3 that remain. There is the aggregate of consciousness that remains. There is the basic wisdom that understands the nature of all phenomena. And there is the mental sense of the 6 sense spheres. These 3 dissolve little by little over the next 4 dissolutions. So they don't dissolve all at once. They dissolve little by little over the next 4. And then they all dissolve at the same time completely at the 8th dissolution. Okay? So the 5th dissolution, now that all the 4 elements have dissolved, what's left is what we call the 80 gross conceptual minds. So these are broken down further into 3 groups depending on the ones that are strong, middling, and weak, and then the types of wind that accompany them. We don't have to go into that detail, but these conceptual minds, the different types of conceptual minds are broken up into 80, and those 80 minds dissolve. And when they dissolve, so I guess I should talk a little bit about the subtle body very quickly. So according to Tantra, we have a subtle body. So it's a body essentially made of light. It's not a coarse body. And the most important parts of this to understand are that we have a channel, what's called the central channel, that is about the size of our pinky in width or in diameter. It's generally the color blue, and it is right in front of our spine, according to most systems. Different tantras explain it differently. And it terminates at the top of our crown, at the crown of our head. Then it goes down our spine all the way to the tip of our sex organ. And so that is the central channel, okay? And then to the right of that, what's called the right channel, and that's red in color, slightly smaller. And that, at the top, it goes up to the top of our head, but then it curves down, and it terminates at our right nostril, instead of terminating at our crown chakra. And then on the left side of that, there's the left channel, and that's white in color. And similar to the red, it runs parallel to the central channel down our body. But then when it comes up to the top of our head, it goes to our crown, and then it curves down and it terminates at our left nostril. Okay? Now, there are different meditations. Sometimes the red and the white channels enter into the central channel down below your navel. Other times they continue all the way to the tip of your sex organ. So it depends on the meditation you're doing, because this body is subtle, so it is somewhat malleable. And in that subtle body, so we have what's called the channels, and then we have what are called the chakras, right? So sometimes they're called the wheel knots. So what a chakra is there are different places of our body where the left and right channels wind around the central channel. By winding around it, they create a knot, essentially, which doesn't allow the subtle winds to move through the central channel smoothly. It becomes like they become blocked, okay? So we talked about having subtle drops and subtle winds that we want to move through these things. Part of practicing Tantra is loosening those chakras to allow our subtle winds and our subtle drops to move through the central channel freely. Okay. And so they're depending on the system, we tend to have 5 primary chakras. So your crown chakra, right? And then your throat, your heart, your navel, and then a chakra at your sex organ. So those tend to be the 5 primary chakras. Then there are secondary chakras that follow, that same line. Different tantras will emphasize different ones. So where the chakras are places where the right and left channels have tied a knot essentially around the central channel. Okay. And so during this fifth dissolution, as the conceptual minds, the 80 conceptual minds or the gross conceptual minds dissolve, what happens is the winds that are in the left channel and the right channel that are above the heart, they enter into the central channel up at the top of the head. So what's happening is the left and right channels, their winds are emptying out into your central channel. And again, I know for most of us, this is not very important information right now, but it's good to know all of this because if we want to go into the practice and meditation, having these details will be helpful, even if it's not helpful right now. So the internal sign of the fifth dissolution is first the flickering of a butter lamp that then becomes a vacuous, empty space that is filled with white light. And that white light is called the mind of the white appearance. And so the sixth dissolution is when that mind of white appearance dissolves. And so when that dissolves, what's happening is the winds that are in our left and right channels below the heart chakra enter into our central chakra down near the base of our spine. So during the fifth dissolution, the winds that were in the left and right channels but above our heart chakra are entering in to our central channel up at the crown of our head. And then the sixth dissolution is when those winds below the heart chakra, right? Because the heart chakra is like a knot tying it off. Those winds below the heart chakra enter into our central channel down at the base of our spine. And the mind of white appearance dissolves, and in the sign is a clear vacuous space that is filled with red light. And that's called the red increase, or the mind of red increase. Then the seventh dissolution is when the mind of red increase dissolves, and it dissolves into what's called, the appearance is a empty space that is filled with blackness. So it's called the black near attainment. That is the sign. And what happens at this point is the winds from that have been gathering in our central channel from the top and the bottom come together, right? And they enter into what we call the indestructible drop at the heart. So they enter into, at the heart, we have the what's called the male and female elements of our body that came from our parents. These are indestructible bodhicitta and indestructible blood drop, they're called. Into that drop at our heart, the winds come from top and bottom and dissolve into it. And that's what's called the mind of black near attainment. So the red increase dissolves into black near attainment. And then the final dissolution is that black mind of near attainment dissolves. So this is what happens when all of the winds dissolve into that indestructible drop at the heart. Not just beginning to, but actually dissolve into it. And the sign of that is a clear empty space that is what's known as the clear light mind. So sometimes they reference it as a mind, an appearance like dawn, you say almost. But is there a mic on? Sorry, okay, sorry. So this is the clear light mind. So this is the last meditation. So once we're dissolving the minds, we have first the earth element, and that dissolves into the water element. The water element dissolves into the fire element. The fire element dissolves into the wind element. The wind element dissolves into the mental consciousness element. When that happens, we reach what would be clinical death, or death according to Western science. And then the dissolution of the mental aggregate happens slowly. So first, our 80 conceptual minds dissolve, and we have what's called the white appearance. Then that white appearance dissolves, and you have what's the red increase. Then the red increase dissolves and is the black near attainment. And then that most subtle appearance dissolves, the black entertainment dissolves into the clear mind of death, or the clear light mind of death. Excuse me. So it's an empty, vacuous space that is clear of all white, red, and black color. And so it's hard for us to visualize, right? Because when we think of something as being clear light mind or clear, we think of white usually, right? But here it's empty of being white and red and black because those appearances we already had. So it's hard to even visualize what it would look like. I usually end up visualizing a white color anyway, even though it's not supposed to be white, but that's like the closest my, baby mind can get. But we should understand that it's not white in color. It's free of that. And, the Dalai Lama talks about this dying process. And he says it's important to remember that we have so back up a step. That mind of clear light, the clear light at the time of death, think of all of the other minds and bodily elements that have dissolved, that no longer are in active existence in our body at that time or in our continuum. Because of that, we're totally free of any worldly shackle. If we can use that opportunity to meditate, we don't only have a physical body that's weighing us down, but we have no conceptual minds at all and no other types of mental impairment that are getting in the way of our meditation. So for great meditators, they use that, they can grab onto that opportunity because they've developed vipassana and shamatha practice, so calm abiding and special insight. They've already developed that in this life. They've already have a mind that's really powerful. So when they recognize they're going through these dissolutions and they reach the stage of the clear light of the mind of death, instead of letting that go away, they're able to rest in that mind, and they have a perfectly expansive mind that can engage in any meditation they want, right? So they can any meditation on the nature of reality, or any meditation on compassion or benefiting their students, any kind of meditation that they want to do, there's nothing blocking them or us if we have ability to make the most of that, okay? That's why it's important to become familiar with it. Now, His Holiness says, the Dalai Lama says that according to the way we understand the body, this cycle of 8 happens all the time. Whenever we fall asleep, we're going to go through this cycle of 8 dissolutions. Now, usually, if you're like me, you're running on not enough sleep. I lay down in my bed and then I'm asleep. So I don't have any opportunity to recognize those dissolutions. But hypothetically, our body is going to go through at least a version of these 8 every time we go to sleep. And then we experience them in the reverse order when we wake up. And not only that, these 8 phases happen other times in our life. When we begin or end a dream, when we sneeze, when we faint, and even during orgasm. So those moments of our life, these 8 dissolutions will happen at the beginning of whatever those are. So falling asleep, entering into a dream, fainting, sneezing, or the beginning of an orgasm, those 8 dissolutions will happen. And then at the end of those, they'll happen in reverse, okay? Now, most of us don't have the ability to actually recognize them at any of those times, but it's just a recognition. The reason His Holiness points it out is to remind us that our experience at the time of death is something we've experienced over and over again in this life. The experience of our body and our mind dissolving, we've already experienced it in this life, never mind in past lives. It's not something new. It's not something to be afraid of. It's a natural part of our body and mind existing in this way of being. If we have a strong meditative capacity, we could recognize all 8 of those dissolutions in both the forward order and the reverse order at those times in this life. Most of us aren't able to do that, okay? But it's possible. So this isn't something new to us. That's the reason he teaches it this way. And yet His Holiness also says, I think this is in his book, Advice for Living and Dying. I think this is where he talks about this. He talks about it, and there's numerous books by His Holiness about the death process. He says, even though he engages in these tantric meditations and similar ones at least 7 or 8 times a day, for him, he thinks the most important mind at the time of death is bodhicitta, a mind dedicated to benefiting all sentient beings, and to become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. So even though we want to go through all these 8 dissolutions, we want to be aware of them, we want to understand all the very subtle machinations of our body, most important is to have a mind that's focused on benefiting others. If you can cultivate a mind focused on benefiting others at the time of your death, that is more important than any of these meditations combined. The reason we do these meditations is so that we're prepared for that moment, so that we aren't overwhelmed by fear at that moment. So when we experience death, whether it be a sudden death or a short death, quick, or a long and drawn out death, when we experience old age and sickness, we don't have fear. We don't have any overwhelming senses. Instead, we are able to look at our experience, recognize what's happening, and be content that we've lived a life that has been filled with Dharma practice, right? So we're not overwhelmed. So we can use that as an opportunity to cultivate virtue and to cultivate bodhicitta. So what I thought I'd do, we have about 25 minutes left. I'd really like to share this prayer from Panchen Losang Gyalten. I translated this a couple of years ago at the request of Lama Zopa Rinpoche. It's available on the FPMT store for free download, but the version I sent is in the chat as well. So I want to go through this, and you'll see how it talks about, it's exploring the process of dying, both in the sutra way of looking at what happens to our body and the death process of becoming a corpse, and then also the tantra way of the 5 elements and so forth dissolving and reaching the mind of clear light. And it's all done in the framework of a a guru devotion practice. So here, let's look at this. It's called The Very Nature of Refuge and Compassion. In fact, it doesn't, Tibetan prayers often don't have titles. And so the title we get is just the first line. And so you have to make up some sort of title, And so the first line of this in Tibetan is the nature of refuge and compassion, because the chorus or the refrain that you'll see in every verse is it's making a plea to your guru. And it's saying, Guru, you who are the bestower of refuge, you who are Chenrezig, the Buddha of compassion, please lead me out of samsara. You who are the very nature of refuge and compassion, right? So every verse is a plea to your guru. So it's combining guru devotion along with a meditation on death. And so here, to do this practice, you would be visualizing your guru who is taking the form of Chenrezig in the space in front, and they are or in the space above the crown of your head, and you're visualizing your guru, your teacher, in the aspect of Chenrezig, who is helping free you from samsara, which is to say, develop a mind of renunciation that is no longer trapped with the attachment to worldly things and to samsara. So I thought I'd go through this prayer very quickly. It's not very long, and then maybe go through some of the verses in a little more detail. But let's just recite the whole prayer once together without stopping, and then we'll go through and just pull out some of the things from the verses. Okay? Guru and Yidam deity, whose very nature is refuge and compassion, I and other sentient beings turn the wheel of birth and death, causing the billionfold world system to overflow with our accumulated flesh and bones. Precious Guru, bestower of refuge, Supreme Arya Chenrezig, lead me out of samsara. Having been carried for 9 months and 10 days in our mother's body, and fought heat and cold, we were born, scraped through a tight bone defile, to emerge naked on the face of this earth. Precious Guru, bestower of refuge, Supreme Arya Chenrezig, lead me out of samsara. For me, a Dharma-less one, a yellow-clad huckster conqueror's son, with a body fully grown in the prime of my life, there is no liberation within this ravine of birth, aging, sickness, and death. Precious Guru, bestower of refuge, Supreme Arya Chenrezig, lead me out of samsara. When the spine that was born straight changes and twists, when my teeth fall out of my mouth, yet I wish for food, and my hair and beard turn white, precious Guru, bestower of refuge, Supreme Arya Chenrezig, lead me out of samsara. When a beautiful countenance becomes a lattice of wrinkles, and eyesight so impaired that even forms aren't clear, and footsteps that were once steady now stagger, precious Guru, bestower of refuge, Supreme Arya Chenrezig, lead me out of samsara. When I have lost my hearing and others scorn me, when the flesh of my body is lost and I am just bones covered and wrapped in skin, and when I give little concern to either food or clothing, precious Guru, bestower of refuge, Supreme Arya Chenrezig, lead me out of samsara. When I am ashamed and disgusted with old age and decrepitude, when my words are met with silence by those who are distant and strife by those who are near, and when both I and others make prayers for death, Precious Guru, bestower of refuge, Supreme Arya Chen Rezig, lead me out of samsara. When under the power of karma I am gripped by a fierce fatal disease like the discs of the sun and the moon being seized by Rahu, and the luster of my glowing countenance has faded, precious Guru, bestower of refuge, Supreme Arya Chen Rezig, lead me out of samsara. When from sickness and pain and anguish moan escapes, and because of the disturbance of the four elements in my body another day and night are not to be met, and divinations are cast, offerings made to the gods, and the demons beaten away, precious Guru, bestower of refuge, Supreme Arya Chen Rezig, lead me out of samsara. When I can no longer digest food, and at the end am surrounded by attendants, although medical treatments and religious rites are administered, they are of no benefit. I can't control my bowels or bladder and soil my bed. Please, precious Guru, bestower of refuge, Supreme Arya Chen Rezig, lead me out of samsara. When the best of foods nauseates, when my lips have curled up and my nose has sunken in, and my teeth get encrusted with grime, when nothing comes to mind other than blue water, when it is time to express my final wishes at the time that I am separated from this life, precious Guru, bestower of refuge, Supreme Arya Chen Rezig, lead me out of samsara. When bulging eyes stare at a nearby face, clutching hands grasp at companions in clothing, and the stench of death clings to my body, precious Guru, bestower of refuge, Supreme Arya Chen Rezig, lead me out of samsara. When my lifespan is depleted, my body exhausted, my physical form and mind have separated, in just a brief moment my power to remain vanishes, like a nighttime shadow as the butter lamp runs out of fuel. Precious Guru, bestower of refuge, Supreme Arya Chen Rezig, lead me out of samsara. When, moreover, the mind abruptly shot forth by death as if by a bowstring is separated from the body, the cause of breath is severed, and when, having left behind wealth and relatives, I go forth alone, precious Guru, bestower of refuge, Supreme Arya Chen Rezig, lead me out of samsara. When, because the earth element dissolves, my navel chakra comes apart, the strength of my body is lost, my limbs can't be controlled, dust collects on my face, and both of my eyes collapse inward, precious Guru, bestower of refuge, Supreme Arya Chen Rezig, lead me out of samsara. When, because the water element dissolves, my heart chakra comes apart, when with feeling deteriorating, my mouth and nose shrivel inward, both nostrils dry up, precious Guru, bestower of refuge, Supreme Arya Chen Rezig, lead me out of samsara. When, because my fire element dissolves, my throat chakra comes apart, the heat of my body dissipates, food and drink can't be digested, and both my right and left ears go deaf, precious Guru, bestower of refuge, Supreme Arya Chen Rezig, lead me out of samsara. When, because the wind element dissolves, my crown chakra comes apart, wheezing harshly, I am unable to breathe, and I become mute, and my taste sense power deteriorates. Precious Guru, bestower of refuge, Supreme Arya Chen Rezig, lead me out of samsara. When the bodhicitta flows downward, and there is the appearance of the white path. When the rakta reverses upward, and there is the appearance of the red path. When they collapse at the center, and there is the suffocating black path. Precious Guru, bestower of refuge, Supreme Arya Chen Rezig, lead me out of samsara. When the 80 natural conceptions sequentially cease and the natural clear light, the nature of Mahamudra, appears uncontrived in my mental continuum. Precious Guru, bestower of refuge, Supreme Arya Chen Rezig, lead me out of samsara. When my root Guru bestows initiations and performs purifying rituals, and close relations gathered together give food and drink to a corpse, shout my name and beat their chests, precious Guru, bestower of refuge, Supreme Arya Chen Rezig, lead me out of samsara. When my neck and hands are brought together and bound with a grass rope, agreeable friends see me off with tears, and I am banished from my soft bed to the charnel grounds. Precious Guru, bestower of refuge, Supreme Arya Chen Rezig, lead me out of samsara. When my body is delivered to the top of a mountain, my four limbs separated with a sharp blade, my intestines, brain, and heart scattered across the plain, and these are eaten by birds, jackals, wolves, and dogs. Precious Guru, bestower of refuge, Supreme Arya Chen Rezig, lead me out of samsara. Or when my body is thrown into blue water, my blood and lymph become mixed with that blue water, my flesh and fat are eaten by the fish and otters. Precious Guru, bestower of refuge, Supreme Arya Chen Rezig, lead me out of samsara. Or when my body is burned in the middle of a fire, my flesh, bones, and skin make a heap of ashes, and are consumed by all male and female Gandharvas. Precious Guru, bestower of refuge, Supreme Arya Chen Rezig, lead me out of samsara. Or when my body is buried under the ground, my flesh, bones, and skin develop the stink of rot, inhaled by the bugs, ants, and bees. Precious Guru, bestower of refuge, Supreme Arya Chen Rezig, lead me out of samsara. Others will claw and scratch to get the wealth I accumulated, but the negativities I accumulated because of that wealth come to me alone. When I am led to justice by the slaughterers of the Lord of Death, precious Guru, bestower of refuge, Supreme Arya Chenrezig, lead me out of samsara. When I have fallen into the abyss of the three bad rebirths, my consciousness without a body, carried away like a feather in the wind, powerless as led into the defile of the bardo, precious Guru, bestower of refuge, Supreme Arya Chenrezig, lead me out of samsara. The beginning of this life passed by in a state of slothful indifference. In the latter part of this life, may I not be lazy, and may I sever clinging, equalizing my life with spiritual practice. Precious Guru, bestower of refuge, Supreme Arya Chenrezig, lead me out of samsara. Great. So you can see, very similar to the prayer we recited earlier, Heart Spoon, this goes through all of these different aspects, reminding us of the process of death and what will happen to our corpses. So it is the perfect meditation to do that is the meditation on the aspect of death. And it includes all of the dissolutions as well. I will say here, so we have, the different elements dissolve. We're running out of time, so I'm just going to go through a few things quickly. The sense objects here are slightly different. The eyes and the ears are in a different order. But other than that, it's the same. So I think that has to do with the lineage of teaching. Now, what I wanted to look at here, we could go through this whole prayer very slowly. We don't have time, but so in the beginning, right, it's recognizing that this first line, I and other sentient beings turn the wheel of birth and death, causing billionfold world system to overflow with our accumulated flesh and bones. What that is saying is, I have taken rebirth again and again and again. If all of my corpses from all of my previous rebirths were collected, they would be a mountain higher than Mount Meru, okay? Billions of world systems would be filled with just the corpses of my bodies. And so this is reflecting on the perfect human rebirth and the fact that we are alive now and have the ability to practice Dharma. So we don't want to waste that opportunity. And here, continuing talking about perfect human rebirth, that we're born as a human. Now here, this is one of my favorite lines. A dharmaless, yellow-clad one, a huckster, conqueror's son. So a conqueror's son is another name for a bodhisattva. And a huckster, conqueror's son is someone who's pretending to be a bodhisattva. So I spend so much of my life, pretending to have some sort of devoted Dharma practice. But instead, I'm just going through the motions, right? So I want to make this life meaningful. That means instead of just going through the motions, I want to take the practice of Dharma and incorporate it into everything I do all of the time. So here we talk about the different aspects of aging, sickness, and death, of our body breaking down, losing conventional beauty, losing our ability to hear. Where's the verses that I want to talk about? The one verse, I thought, most of this is very self-explanatory. The one verse that I really wanted to point out that I think is important is here near the end. Here. Others will claw and scratch to get the wealth I accumulated, but the negativities I accumulated because of that wealth come to me alone. When I am led to justice by the slaughterers of the Lord of Death, precious Guru, bestower of refuge, Supreme Arya Chenrezig, lead me out of samsara. So this is saying that at the time of our death, those who are near to us in this life, our friends and our family, will fight over our possessions, right? They will go to great lengths and arguments about who gets what when we die. And yet, in order to accumulate that wealth in the first place, we most likely had to engage in negative actions. And the negative consequences of those negative actions that brought about that wealth, doesn't matter who ends up with my wealth after I die, I still have to reap the consequences, right? Nothing can help you at the time of your death. Your wealth and your possessions are of no benefit. And yet, whatever negative actions you did to accumulate that wealth or those possessions, those stick with you. That negative karma sticks with you. So that verse, I think, is really powerful. It reminds me that at the time of death, I don't know how many of you have I don't know what it's like in Indian culture. In America, for instance, when my best friend died, he was the baby of 14 kids. 3 of whom had died as children or as infants. So there were 11 children in his family. He was the baby. He was in his 70s when he died. Excuse me. I'm talking about his brother, actually, his older brother. When he died, it was similar, but I kind of cut his family off. So I didn't let his family become vultures. When his older brother died, which was a few years earlier, we went to his brother's house and all the family members were there just taking whatever they could get from the house, right? This person died and dozens of family members. You can imagine if there are 11 kids, then how many nieces and nephews and cousins and all these things were just at his house taking things. That was their priority, was what could they take from his house? What could they get, you know? So this attitude of these things that we spent so much time, so much energy and wealth and, so much of our mental capacity accumulating, they just get ripped away from us. And those people that we hold dear in our lives, they're more focused on gaining more possessions for themselves, right? That is how they overcome their grief of our passing, is by taking our stuff and fighting with our other relatives about who gets the best stuff. Now, that's not always the case. And there are some families that are much more friendly and harmonious than that, okay? But that's definitely not something that I'm sure all of you have seen some sort of experience that's similar to that. It just reminds us, or reminds me, how little benefit any of these worldly possessions are. And while we need to cultivate spiritual possessions, that is what will benefit us. We have to cultivate spiritual relationships that aren't built on self-grasping, that aren't built on attachment only, but relationships built on a genuine wish to be of service to others, a genuine love for others that wants them to be happy and wants them to have every happiness, a genuine compassion, wanting our family members and our friends to be free from suffering. Those are the kind of relationships we need to cultivate. Okay? The possessions we need to fill our lives with are spiritual possessions. We have to fill our lives with the good qualities of all the bodhisattvas, of their wisdom and their insight, their ability to meditate, their ability to analyze whatever's going on in their life and to make it part of their Dharma practice, even if it's difficult external circumstances. Those are the possessions we need. That is what benefits us. And now, here, as we're at the end of these 4 weeks talking about death and impermanence, what it all comes back to for me, the reason we meditate on our own death isn't because we're morbid, but it's because we want to live a meaningful life now. We want to make every moment of our life count. And the way we do that is by being aware of the fact that we're not guaranteed tomorrow. So that eliminates our minds of procrastination. And being aware of that makes us realize how incredibly precious this moment is right now. And then when we realize that, instead of letting this moment be filled with worldly things, we take the opportunity to engage in a spiritual practice and find real fulfillment, right? That's what's most important. And I know that today, our class, we got into the nitty gritty with this very weird dissolution meditation practice. And that's an important part of learning about what it means to meditate on death and impermanence, okay? It's important because it shows us what is going to happen at the time of death, and it helps us eliminate the fear of our body dissolving at the time of death, of all the things that we're going to experience. By eliminating that fear, becoming prepared for it, then we won't actually be afraid when it starts happening. So it's an important thing to discuss, but it's also a lot of details, and it isn't very it doesn't feel applicable to our everyday life, right? Even though it is a meditation we can do every day and we should do on the regular basis. So it's unfortunate that we end there, but it's the kind of the most subtle part of this topic. So that's why it comes at the end. So what I really want to end the class with, though, and this 4-week program, is the reminder that being aware that we're not guaranteed tomorrow shouldn't be a downer. What that should do is it should motivate us. It should instill in us a joy for life, a joy that we are alive now. We have the opportunity to practice Dharma. We have the opportunity to love others, to cultivate compassion, to generate wisdom. We can do that right now. We are doing that right now by dedicating this time together this evening to studying the Dharma, to learning how to meditate and practice the Dharma. Okay? That's what we're doing right now. We're making the most of this precious human life because we don't have any guarantee it's going to last. So by meditating on death and impermanence, every moment becomes Dharma practice. Every moment brings us closer to Buddhahood. That is what it means to make your mind inseparable from death and impermanence and the meditations on death and impermanence. That's what's most important. You meditate on your own death because that frees you from the fear at the time of death to allow you to cultivate virtue, to cultivate love, compassion, and bodhicitta, a mind wishing to benefit others. And that makes everything you do a Dharma practice, everything you do meaningful. And that is what I hope for myself and for all of you. And hopefully, this class on death and impermanence can help make that more real in your lives. So with that, it's already almost 8, but if there are any questions that we want to kind of wrap up things with, please, we'll have some time for that.
Dear Venerable, can
Yes.
I ask one clarification question, please? You mentioned
Sure.
quite early on in the session that after we've developed the 3 determinations, we move on to meditate on the aspects of death. Did that mean, like procedurally, that we first start with one and continue with the other? Or did it mean we first should have a fairly stable realization of the 3 determinations and then only bother with the meditation on death?
No. So it means the way they're taught procedurally is in that order. But as with all of our Lamrim meditations, if we waited to have a firm realization of one before moving on to the next, most of us wouldn't get very far. So they're sequenced in that way because the meditating on the aspects of death builds off of developing the 3 determinations that come from the 9-point meditation. So they're sequenced in that order. So if you were doing them all in one practice, that's the sequence you do them in, and that's the sequence they're taught in. But definitely, you don't have to wait till you have a firm understanding or realization of the 3 determinations before moving on. You can do them all.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Lekden, I have a question,
Sure.
but it is from the earlier class when I was thinking. So, so there is a Uttarakuru, you know, where the beings have fixed time lifespan.
Mm-hmm.
There are 2 things related with them. Is how is that hindrance? Because they say Jambudvipa is even better than that. And second one was that it is said that they are not suitable vessels to carry out, take
Vows.
vows. Yeah. So why is that so? These are the 2 questions.
So, you're asking Abhidharma question. So we talk about Zambuling or Jambudvipa, which is basically our world system, and then around Mount Meru in the cosmology of Indian and Tibetan Buddhism, we say there are the 8 continents essentially, right? And one of them is Uttarakuru, who have a fixed lifespan, and they are not proper receptacles for vows. To be honest, I did know this. I don't remember why they're not proper receptacles for vows. There are reasons for it. It all comes down to cosmology, basically. And so, what's most important from that teaching is to recognize the value of living on Jambudvipa, right? Of living in this world system that we live in, whether we consider that Earth or this galaxy. How Indian cosmology relates to contemporary Western cosmology is up for debate sometimes. But so sorry, I don't have a definite answer. I can find one for you because it's in Abhidharma. I just don't know off the top of my head. And the same thing with them having a fixed lifespan is, there was a point in Jambudvipa where we had fixed lifespans as well. And as you know, this is the age of generation. So our lifespans are getting shorter and shorter and shorter until the average lifespan right now is about 100 years. But it'll get to a point where it's only about 10 years, at which point the teachings of the Buddha will almost entirely go away in this world. So it's just the cycle, like this very large eon level cycle of existence, and the answers are quite esoteric. So I don't know if they're very satisfying. Sorry, I'm not very helpful.
Thank you. Venerable.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if there aren't any other questions,
just that there are some comments here.
Okay.
These are general and not specific to the topic, but do these classes happen often? So, as a volunteer of Choe Khor Sum Ling, is it okay, Venerable, if I just introduce it to everybody, how Choe Khor Sum Ling
Yeah,
operates?
I mean, I can as well, since,
Yeah, thank
you
you.
know, the,
Oh, there's a question about the topic. They say, are we God having a human experience?
so Tibetan Buddhism or Buddhism says no, that the God realm is a different type of birth than a human birth. There are three upper types of rebirth, three positive rebirths. You can be reborn as a human or a demigod or a god. Really, the demigods are, in our human view, they're essentially gods, but there's a slight distinction. So you can be reborn as a god or a demigod. That is not the same as being reborn as a human. And the reason being born as a human is preferable is because life in a divine realm is free from a lot of the physical suffering that we experience as humans. And because of that, there's very little motivation to actually engage in Dharma practice. And so instead of using those opportunities to engage in meaningful progress towards Buddhahood, you waste and you burn off all of this good karma you've created in the past, and you waste it all on sense pleasure and on worldly pleasure. And then at the end of that life as a god, there's different types of gods, right? But at the end of that divine lifetime, you have wasted so much of your good karma that you're often reborn in a lower realm as an animal or a hungry ghost or a hell being. And so we are not gods that are experiencing the lives of humans. We're actually reborn as a human, which of the 6 types of rebirth is the most beneficial to engage in spiritual practice. So it's not an experience of humanity. It's we actually reborn as humans. Now, as to the question about our classes here, CKSL, our 2 main classes are on the weekends. So on Saturday evenings, these classes are more of an advanced beginner level class. Sometimes they're a medium or intermediary class, but right now they're mostly advanced beginner, and they tend to be they build on each other. So this is the last class on our Death and Impermanence session. There were 4 sessions. And starting next week, we're going to be talking about karma, so the law of cause and effect, and that will be for 5 sessions. That'll be Saturday evenings for 5 weeks. Our Sunday morning classes start at 10 a.m., and those are a much broader series. Those are inviting to everyone. They don't necessarily build on each other, so you can come to any one and you won't be missing anything. You won't have lost, whatever you missed from the last week if you can't come every week. And those are called How to Be Happy, Practical Buddhist Meditation and Wisdom for Everyday Life. So those classes on Sundays are made to be more accessible to everyone, and they're made to really learn how to take different aspects of the Buddhist path to live in your everyday life, not just when you're studying and not just when you're on a meditation cushion. So it combines meditation instruction as well as studying texts sometimes or studying other meditation topics, but it's meant to be more accessible to everyone. So those are the Sunday morning classes. And the Saturday classes are the ones that are sequential and are building on a specific topic, where the Sundays are more broad and wide open. Now, there are also meditations that we host throughout the week, and maybe Deepti or Alice can speak to those because I don't know the exact meditation schedule, but there are meditations that happen online throughout the week.
So can I continue for a little while? So thank you, Venerable. Yes, Choe Khor Sum Ling is almost open online for most of the week because we host meditation sessions on Mondays and Fridays. We have a very dedicated band of volunteers who give their time in the evenings. I think it starts at 7:30 in the evenings on Mondays and Fridays, and there are meditations on different topics. It's the right thing for you to do, just to take a little break from your schedule and just sit down and meditate. It's very immersive and beautiful. I recommend all of you to join in. I also recommend all of you to join the when Alice will tell you more about it, but the plan is to also have meditations in the morning. And I think we did 1 round of it, right, Alice?
Yeah, we kept going for some weeks. The only challenge is that because now I'm in Europe, then actually the meditations are happening every morning. So these are sort of, I would say, intermediate beginner or advanced beginner. They are quite long. It's a so-called 7-limb practice, which okay, no time to explain now, but it's a more elaborate practice that contains multiple smaller practices recommended for when you want to be very quickly developing spiritually for the benefit of all sentient beings. This is on Buddha Shakyamuni. It follows the instructions from Gyalten Rinpoche. And at the moment, if anyone is interested, they are happening from 9:45 a.m. India time for 75 minutes. So 9:45 to 11, yeah. So it's a little bit mid-morning, but if anyone is either working from home and has flexibility or is maybe working night shifts, this time might be manageable for you. If yes, please somehow ping me or someone at CKSL and I will let you know how to access them. We're not advertising them now so much because just the time is not great for India, but they are happening daily.
Yeah. Do shoot us a private message on, you can't talk in the CKSL community, but do shoot us a private message. We are one of the admins and we'll respond to you. Also, I'm going to take this opportunity to say our center, you have to come visit our center. It's a beautiful little oasis in such a chaotic Bangalore. Just stop in, come there, sit with us, have some interaction, listen to the teachings. And it's very beautiful. I always advertise this. It's the walls are full of wonderful paintings of the Buddha, of Buddhas, different Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. The environment is very conducive for meditation. So take this time, drop by anytime on Saturday and Sunday, and become part of this larger community.
Yeah. Great. Yeah, I'd love for everyone, we're doing our best. Ever since COVID, it's been hard to keep people in the center in Bangalore, and people are very attracted to online, which is wonderful that we're building a more of an online presence, but we really would love to have people at the center as well. And of course, there are things like this weekend where we couldn't have any programs at the center because the teachers, myself and Venerable couldn't travel, and because of the weather warning. But next weekend, we'll be there at the center, both Saturday and Sunday, and the weekend after that as well. So we really would love people to be there. As this is our final class on Death and Impermanence, we will now take, since I think there's no more questions, instead of admin chat, let's go ahead and do a dedication. And we'll do a little bit extra prayer today, dedication prayer. So in all of our practice, we want our practice to be virtuous in the beginning, middle, and end. And so what that means is in the beginning, we set a strong motivation, right? So when we started, we set the motivation that we are studying today, not just for our own benefit, so that we could benefit others. That made our practice virtuous in the beginning. And in the middle, we actually engaged in virtuous activities by studying the Dharma, by learning about this meditation topic. And we want our practice to be virtuous in the end by dedicating any merit. So what that means is we recognize that by engaging in this Dharma practice together this evening, we've accumulated some good karma or some merit. And instead of keeping that for ourselves alone, we dedicate that to other sentient beings. We wish that that merit could ripen on other sentient beings, that they might experience the blissful results of that good karma, that they might be free from suffering of samsara. And so we dedicate our merit to all others, to benefit others instead of ourselves. And that makes our practice pure or virtuous in the beginning and the middle and the end. And this is something you should do in all of your practices throughout your day, is you want them to be virtuous in three ways. In the beginning, by having a strong motivation. In the middle, by actually being virtuous in their activity. And in the end, by dedicating any merit you've accumulated to benefit others instead of yourself. And so we dedicate any merit we've accumulated for all sentient beings to be free from all the sufferings of samsara. We dedicate it to all of our holy teachers, that they may continue to show the aspect of having long lives that are free from illness, and may continue to teach the holy Dharma. We dedicate this merit so that all of the Dharma centers and temples may continue to engage in wonderful programs that help lead sentient beings out of samsara. We dedicate this to all of those who are sick, who have died recently, that they might be free from the physical suffering of their body. They may quickly achieve perfect human rebirth, meet with Mahayana virtuous friends, and more quickly be free from all of the sufferings of samsara and become Buddhas themselves. And finally, we dedicate this merit so that we might become Buddhas, because as Buddhas, we will be of maximum benefit to others. So we dedicate this merit to our own Buddhahood, so that we might be of most service to others. And so we will recite a few prayers, a brief dedication prayer, and then, since this is the last class, we will do a little more elaborate one, but not very long, it'll be very quick. So this first prayer we will do in Tibetan, and the rest will be in English. Gyalten sem Choe Rinpoche ma ke panam ke gyurchi ke wa nyam pa me pa yang gone gondu pelwa shok. In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good, a powerful Chenrezig, Tenzin Gyatso. Please remain until samsara ends. Savior of the snowland teachings and transmigratory beings who makes extremely clear the path that is the unification of emptiness and compassion, to the lotus holder, Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. May the glorious Guru's lives be long and stable. May all beings equally in the extent of space have happiness. May I and others without exception accumulate merit and purify negativities. May we be blessed to quickly attain Buddhahood. For my two collections, as vast a space that I have amassed from working with effort at this practice for a great length of time, may I become the chief leading Buddha for all those whose minds' wisdom eye is blinded by ignorance. Even if I do not reach this state, may I be held in your loving compassion for all lives, Manjushri. May I find the best of complete graded paths of the teachings, and may I please all the Buddhas by my practice. Using skillful means drawn by the strong force of compassion, may I clear the darkness from the minds of all beings with the points of the path as I have discerned them. May I uphold Buddha's teachings for a very long time. With my heart going out with great compassion in whatever direction the most precious teachings have not yet spread, or once spread have declined, may I reveal this treasure of happiness and aid. May the minds of those who wish for liberation be granted bounteous peace, and the Buddha's deeds be nourished for a long time by even this graded path to enlightenment completed due to the wondrous virtuous conduct of the Buddhas and their sons. May all human and non-human beings who eliminate adversity and create conducive conditions for practicing the excellent paths never be parted in any of their lives from the purest path praised by the Buddhas. Whenever someone makes an effort to act in accordance with the tenfold Mahayana virtuous practices, may he always be assisted by the mighty ones, and may oceans of prosperity spread everywhere. May the king of Dharma, Tsongkhapa's way of Dharma practice flourish. May the omens of obstacles be pacified. May all conducive conditions be complete. By relying on the two accumulations of myself and others in the three times, may the teachings of the conqueror Lobsang Drakpa blaze for a long time. Great. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for being part of this series, these 4 classes, these 4 weeks of classes. I really appreciate the opportunity to be part of it. So thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing you either tomorrow in our general class or next week when we start a new section on karma. So I look forward to it.
Thank you,
Thank you, Venerable.
Thank you.
Thank you for such an enriching class today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining in, and please come back again and again. And thank you, Venerable. All right, Anilji, please come to the center sometime. And also you, Pratibhaji. JC, next week, I hope to see you there. Yogeshji, please come to the center sometime.
Sure.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Bye.